Hello and welcome. My name is Aisha Haynes, and I will be the host and moderator for this ADEIL conference session. Thank you for joining us for Integrating Coaching Principles into the Academic Classroom. Please welcome Mary Alice Jeremiah and Bill Davis.
Hello, everyone. Good morning to half and good afternoon to other half, I guess. It's such a wonderful thing to be able to talk to so many people all over the world like this. I'm amazed with it because when I began, we didn't have anything like this. And I want to start out and go for it right away so that we can get into some of the things that I have been very passionate about over my lifetime. I am really a benefactor of Title IX. Years ago, when I started my professional career, actually it was before I started my professional career, because as a little girl, the thing I loved to do the most was play basketball. I always wanted to get outside or get in the gym as much as I could. I just loved the sport. And as I grew up and went through high school, I really wanted to do that as a career, but because there were no opportunities for women to do this full time, I knew that the only way that I could do this full time was to teach also. So I began my professional preparation part of my life in a pedagogical setting where I was learning to become a teacher. And then as I got positions, I knew that I would be able to coach, and basketball is what I really wanted to coach. As this went on into my college career, I really knew that it wasn't going to be possible for me to be a full-time basketball coach. And then Title IX happened. And when Title IX happened, that gave women some opportunities that we had never had before. I went through my graduate degree, trying to see how much I could get out of the teaching preparation. And then as I got toward the end of my doctoral studies and Title IX became more effective, I got my full-time head job at the University of Dayton in Ohio. Everybody would ask me, what am I teaching? And I said, well, I'm a full-time basketball coach. You don't teach any classes? No, I don't teach any classes. I just coach. In fact, my father, who was a college president at the undergraduate school where I got my degree at Cedarville University, used to ask me, why did I need to have a PhD to coach? And I didn't really spend an awful lot of time trying to explain that to him. I just knew that I was doing something and I was training for something that I had a passion for, and that was coaching. But because I had been trained to be a teacher with competency-based objectives, knowing how to assess, knowing how to write down things that I wanted to accomplish in such a way that I could really assess them, I realized that there was something about what I had learned that was really going to help me in the coaching profession, because it gave me an opportunity to do what I had a passion for. And I'd just like to share something with you that's been a real inspiration to me. And Will Hobbs, a really famous columnist, wrote, "Passion makes possible waking up in the morning, whoever you are, wherever you are, however old you are, or however young you are, and bounding out of bed because there's something out there that you love to do, that you believe in, that you're good at, and something that's bigger than you are. And you can hardly wait to get at it today." That's what I think passion is. And when you find that thing that you're really passionate about, it's amazing how all of the things that you've been trained to do one thing can help you do another thing. And so that's why I have the subtitle on the first slide, Successful Coaches Teach and Successful Teachers Coach. One of the things, some things that I learned from coaching that have helped me in teaching, and I think this is so applicable to our teaching in an online situation, is that the players in the game are more important than the game. To me, that means the students in my class are really more important than what I'm teaching in terms of content. Although content is everything, it's not everything. So that analogy becomes very, very succinct for me when I think back on what I learned as a coach, that the players or the students in the class are more important than the game or the course. Another thing that I learned was this: everything of value that you hope to achieve in your life demands practice. I used to tell my players in the gym, when you try something new and you think you failed, you didn't fail. You're just practicing it. You're practicing to get better. So don't be afraid to practice. How great of an analogy is that in the classroom when you're helping students, and especially re-entry students as adults, as we do a lot at Ashford, to improve their writing, although that's not really just for re-entry students, that's for 18-year-olds, isn't it? Where our writing needs to be improved. And when you tell them that they're not failing, they're just practicing to get better, that's an analogous to one of the things that I learned when I was coaching. The other thing is, none of us are smarter than all of us. And boy, with Bill here and I think my brother's in the audience, which I wish he weren't, but I'm glad he is, and it means a lot to me, Jim, that you're here. But with people like Bill and Jim and the people in my life who have mentored me, there's nothing that we can do just by ourselves. And I learned that in coaching. And then one other thing, and I'm going to get on to some things that are a little bit more succinct to what we're doing, is that teamwork is about trust. And trust is believing that someone always has your back. A team is not a team. A class is not a class unless there's a culture where you know that there is trust between you and the students or the athletes that you coach. Real briefly, and you can fit in the word for teaching. Coaching is a process where a coach or a teacher and an athlete or a student engage in some type of skilled performance where the coach is the leader of the process. And I learned this so early on when I was first starting to coach, that if I couldn't teach well and I couldn't present something so that my athletes really knew what I was talking about, then the performance and the skill that I wanted them to have was not going to happen. We used to have a saying that said, if your heart can believe it, if your heart can conceive it and your heart can believe it, you can achieve it. And I can't even say it right. And the problem with that is, if your mind can conceive it and your heart can believe it, there is a big gap between that and achieving it. And that's what we're trying to do in the classroom, and what we're trying to do in the other things that we do when we try to impact students. We're just trying to improve their skill so that their performance in life can be better. And, you know, practice doesn't make perfect, and perfect practice doesn't make perfect. Performance practice makes perfect. That is something that I actually came to believe later in my coaching life. And boy, has that helped me in teaching. You can practice, and if you can practice, and then you can perfectly practice. But if you don't practice the way you want to perform, if you don't speak and communicate and write and do the things that you want to do in a performance way, then that practice is going to be somewhat limited. Here's what coaches do. And I want to talk about 3 of these really briefly. Coaches are philosophy developers. They're cooperative communicators, culture creators, skill teachers, positive motivators, and team managers. And I want to briefly talk about 3 of these. I can't even do one of them in 10 minutes, let alone 3 of them in 45. So I'm going to try to just touch the basics of what I feel that I learned and how we can integrate the coaching principles into the classroom. When I was doing undergraduate work at Cedarville University, I learned the importance of developing a philosophy, first of life, and then of coaching. I cannot tell you how important that has been to me throughout my life. As all of us who are teachers and instructors, I hope that we all have a philosophy that we live by. I'm going over this because it's a reminder. Go back and look at your philosophy. If you have written it, Go back and look at its writing. If you haven't written it, then write it. Because one of the things that I learned as I worked with a group of 18 to 22-year-olds, that it was really, really important for me to know why I was doing what I was doing. So early on, I developed a philosophy of coaching, which was the development of the complete player, physically, mentally, spiritually, socially, and in all of their dimensions. And everything I did as a coach was based upon that philosophy. So it is the foundation for what we do. It's how and why we do it, and how we behave in a context in the role that we're in. For example, in the classroom, if you know why you teach, you're going to teach in a certain way. And one of the things that a philosophy does is that it gives you a consistency about what you do. And I like this little chart because it goes from one arrow to the other. It gives you a consistency in your approach. When I stopped coaching, my players, I didn't ask them to do this, but my athletes, after over 30 years and hundreds of athletes, were asked what they liked most about Coach Jeremiah. And I didn't know anybody had sent this to them. And I didn't know if I really wanted to read it or not, but you do, because after all these years. And I actually thought it was going to be something like, she was just a great teacher of offensive skill. She was great in the game. She was awful in practice, or whatever it is that they were talking about. But the one thing that the majority of my players said that they liked most about the years that I coached was that I was consistent. And I started to think about that, and I thought, you know what? It was what they saw was what they got. I came into practice every day because I love the game. And sometimes when things were down for me, I would just say to them, look, this has been a little bad time. I love you. I love what I'm doing. We need to work together today to make this better. And I would do those kinds of things every once in a while. And they knew that when they came into practice, just as they know when they come into class, that they were going to have a certain consistency. It enables you to put things in order. Your consistency in your coaching behavior creates respect and trust with your athletes. And most of all, and the best thing that I loved about coaching, which I love about teaching, and actually I love about life, is that it leads to quality relationships. That's where it is with me. I love people. I love differences. I love to talk to people about differences. Jim, you'll know that I love to argue. I like to state what I believe, where I'm coming from. And as my philosophy in life and in coaching has helped me in my teaching and in my relationships with other people, it's kind of created a lot of trust and stability. And in your classroom, it's the same thing. But if you don't know why you teach, if you don't know why you're doing something, then you're going to be all over the place. And this coaching philosophy has really, really helped me. I put this little saying on this slide because it helps me to know that when you know what you're about, your decisions become clear and consistent. And there's more to this, and I want to just share this more with you. When you know who you are and your mission is clear, and you burn with the inner fire of unbreakable will, no cold can touch your heart, no deluge can dampen your purpose, because you know you're alive. And that's what I think having a philosophy of teaching is all about. You know your purpose, you know your mission, you know why you do it. And sometimes in every class, it becomes very difficult because some of the classes have a variety of students where you just really absolutely do not know where they're coming from. I think my phone is ringing, but I guess you can't hear it, right? You can't hear my phone, right? All right. So that's what it's about as far as a coaching philosophy is concerned. It just tells you who you are. I want to talk to you a little bit about communication, because remember, we were saying that in the very beginning that coaches are cooperative communicators. If there's anything in coaching that is needed, it's people who can communicate clearly. And sometimes I have so many things to say to so many people that the credibility or the communication, the clarity of my communication, has to go back to just don't say so many words, just say what is supposed to be said. And I want to talk to you about how communicating credibly is so important, not only in coaching, but obviously if successful teachers coach and successful coaches teach, then we're integrating the whole thing. Credibility is saying the truth. Let me give you an example of one of the things that used to happen to me as a coach all the time. We would be in the middle of a game and I needed to make a substitution. And usually I made it for one of two reasons. I either made it because the players that were playing that needed to be substituted needed to be not substituted. They weren't doing very well. Other times you needed to put a different group of people together, not because one person wasn't doing so well, but you needed to see what it's like to have a different 5 people in the game. But when players would come out of the game, they would always feel that they're coming out of the game because they did something wrong. And I learned not to tell a player, good job, because all of the other 14 people on the bench are telling them good job when they didn't do a good job. And what I learned to do was to tell them very quickly why they were coming out of the game. You're not coming out because you did anything wrong. I could be, and then I learned to joke with them. It would have been nice had you made that wide open layup, but that's not why I took you out of the game. I took you out of the game because we need a different look. But the students on the bench would always tell them that they played well. And I remember telling them in practice, be encouraging, but don't lie. Be credible, but don't tell each other that you're doing something that you're not doing, because that kind of communication is very, very confusing, and it's very, very confusing to students. Communicate with a positive approach, and I guess that goes with credibility. Be honest. My philosophy of coaching is based on 3 core principles that I do not want to compromise for anything. The first one is honesty. That's saying the truth. The second one is integrity. That's doing what I say. And the third one is wisdom. Having the wisdom to look at my answers and look at my responses with my students through the eyes of more than just my own. My faith helps me to look it through the eyes of God, but my students will help me to look it through their eyes also. So it's communicating with a positive approach. I had a student just about 2 weeks ago, and Bill, I can address you on this, that told me that I was mean. They wrote me and told me I was mean. I had been mean in my response to them. Now I went back to my response to them, and I remember thinking to myself, if you think that's mean, I'm glad you didn't coach, that I didn't coach you. Because as I was growing up as a young coach, I'm sure I was not as positive as as I've finished coaching. So it's important to be positive. So I went back and I wrote back to that student and I said, I apologize if you perceived my being mean. All I was trying to do was to help you get better, And there's a transfer of that. That's messages also in high communication, making sure that the information is accurate, that you're giving them the kinds of things that will really help you. The thing that I've learned in teaching, and especially for Ashford, as I grade and evaluate a lot of the written material, is that a lot of the writing needs correction. And I find myself wanting to correct every single mistake in their writing because I want someone to do that for me. And one of the things that I say to them a lot of times is, go back and read your writing as if you're the reader. Go back and read it as if you're the reader. Well, if I go back and read some of the things that I've written, and I'm the reader, I think I've lost my mind. Who wrote that? Left out words, didn't have correct punctuation, phrases at the end. So messages and information is the part of being a cooperative communicator. And do it with consistency. Do it with consistency. And again, that is a very important part of integrating these principles that I learned as a coach into a classroom. One of the things I've also learned teaching at Ashford and teaching at Hope International University, and I did not communicate this with early on in the session, was as I was finishing my coaching career, I began being very, very interested in the Everest expeditions. And I started reading every single thing I could read about everybody who ever went to Everest and what they went through. And so I developed a business called Your High Places. And that business is based on what high mountain climbers do to reach a summit. And that's exactly what we do in our lives. We choose our high place, we commit to our high place, we train for it, we then climb it, we have some pitfalls, and then we summit it. Now, I've done many, many things across the country and with teams about high mountain climbing, but I want to talk about this in relationship with communicating with consistency. When you're talking about something that you're trying to help people reach, like a summit in their life, one of the things that's important is what commitment is, how you make a commitment to something. And when I speak to students or talk to students and now write to students, I lean to learn how to do this consistently. And if I know what commitment means, and the best definition of commitment that I've ever heard in my life is commitment is doing what you said you'll do when the mood you set it in is over. Doing what you said you'll do when the mood you set it in is over. When you want to lose weight, you don't ever commit to it when you're not hungry, because that's easy. But a student in a class who commits to this to get a degree, if they are reminded consistently that if they really made a commitment to this, when they made it, then you cannot, if you make it and then you have to realize the mood that you're in, keeping that commitment, in spite of the mood, is important for them to be reminded of. This communication thing for me is a journey. It's a high place for me. It's something that I am very committed to. But as I had to learn to communicate in writing, and like I am today, this is one of the first times I've ever even done this in a session. So I just thought, I'm just going to talk like I talk in a classroom and hopefully it works. But to be able to write my communication and to write it successfully and consistently with high information and positively and with credibility, it takes a practice. And I have to tell myself, I don't fail, I just practice. And when Bill and the people that may supervise me give me an evaluation, I'm not going to sit there and be upset and think I've failed. What they're telling me is that I need to practice. I need to get better. And no matter how old you are, that is one of the things I think is very, very important in communicating. The last one, which is sometimes very difficult for me to do, is learn to listen. That is also an ongoing journey. You cannot listen only to get your own chance. And we've all listened that way. We listen and everybody knows you're just being quiet until you can speak. And when you're talking to students, it can't be that way. You have to listen. And that's why, while I like a lot of the technological things that we have, like signals and the other things that we have in classrooms, I really like to communicate with my students personally on email or through text or even through calling. I just find that I feel more personal with them and I can listen to them. And pretty soon, they're kind of telling you their life stories and where they got to where they are. And now you can get into their head and you can communicate with the other things that we have. I'm not going to talk over about your nonverbal communication because that is not, that's very, very important in a gym. Very important in a coaching situation. You don't want kids to have their hands on their hips and rolling their eyes and not looking at you. I learned early on in the coaching classroom to tell students that they should look at who they're talking to and who's talking to them. And I said, if you look at me, right at me, and you look at me like you're looking, like you're thinking, like you're listening, I'll probably think you are. But once you learn to do that, you can fool a lot of people. You can look right at them, you can act interested, you're trying to listen, and yet you are showing them respect in that you are learning how to listen to them. So major communication skills are the things that I have learned that have really helped me. I put this on because I think it's really funny. I think it's really emotional. These are the kind of communicators we are. Always right, consistently negative, constantly judging, emotionally silent, incessantly talking, inconsistently messaging, intellectually confusing, and inaccurately reinforcing. Now, as I look at those, it reminds me of a book that I read, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And one of the things that I learned in that book was that no matter how far you get to be somewhere, whatever got you there isn't going to get you further. And so when I look at these communication issues, I look at these and I think, okay, Mary Alice, which ones are you? Which ones say what you are? And as I write in my distance learning, as I try to communicate, am I always right? Am I negative? I don't think I'm negative. I think I'm a pretty positive person. I'm hardly ever emotionally silent. So when you go down through these things with yourself, it's a really good evaluation tool that tells you what kind of a communicator you are. And I look through this a lot and I see where are these areas that I need to improve. I think probably talking too much, but when I write, it doesn't seem as much as when you're talking. So sometimes you can just write and write and write and you don't think you're talking too much. Am I intellectually confusing? This is a big one because this is where content comes in, and Ashford has given me a lot of opportunity to teach some things that I've really wanted to teach for a long time. And I really need to be careful that I do not intellectually confuse my students because I might not be as prepared as I need to be. And I want to be sure that I don't teach something that I will be intellectually confusing with my students. The inaccurately reinforcing goes back to communicating positively and accurately. So if these help you, use them as an evaluation tool about communication. Now, let's talk a little bit about motivation. I got about 3 or 4 minutes. I think, I don't want to keep looking at my watch, but motivation is basically directing a type of behavior that you want that pursues a goal that has some level of effort. That's very, very basic. If you take this with an athlete, one of those goals could be, we need to learn this specific offense for a game that we will be playing next Saturday. Now, if you've done your homework and you've taught them basic skills, the ones that they need, then that homework is going to help you to teach this, this skill. And it's going to be the pursuance of a goal. And that goal will be that everybody who is teaching and is learning in that class is going to be being motivated toward that goal. If you're an offensive player and you have to be, I got to go back to this slide. And you have to be skilled enough to have this behavior go toward that goal, then your level of effort has to be pretty good. You can't, you absolutely cannot be motivated. You cannot go through this exercise and not have some kind of motivation. So it's directing your behavior through to a goal, and it has to have some kind of effort. Let's talk about effort. This is that attribution theory. Winners attribute failure to their lack of effort, and failure increases their motivation. But losers attribute their failure to their lack of ability, and their failure leaves them powerless to change. Let's talk about winners. And winners are not just athletes, winners are students in a classroom. If they fail at something and they believe that they can do what they're doing, then they're always going to think, I got to try harder. I have the ability. I just have to try harder. So in a classroom, when you're talking to students and you can sense that they do not feel they have the ability, then I believe that it's our job as teachers and as coaches to motivate them to believe they do have the ability and they just need to work harder at it. However, there's some real failures to this. In my coaching, I used to tell kids, if we work hard, we have a chance to win. And you know, it's interesting, players don't hear all that. They hear, if we work hard, we will win. And then when they work hard and they either don't get a chance to play, or they don't get into practice very much, or they don't get the skill they need, they feel that, well, they worked hard, why didn't they win? This is where I think a coach and a teacher really comes in. And this is where consistent communication really, really helps. I teach some classes right now where it's very obvious there are students that really do not have the ability to get through Ashford. They do not have the ability. I do not tell them that they do. I encourage them along the way that they just need to try to keep getting better. I told a student yesterday, I'm giving you a basic in your writing, not because it was only that basic, but I want it to be proficient because you're good enough to make it proficient. So if in this little rubric, I do basic, and then I explain to them why I did it when their writing really wasn't that terrible, I'm taking a C student and making them a B student. A B student who can only be a B student is better than an A student who could be an A student but doesn't have the effort to become one. I hope that makes sense. That's when a winner attributes their failure to their lack of effort, and then they will always, their motivation will always increase. Where on the other side, if someone believes they don't have the ability, it leaves them powerless. I can't speak Japanese, so I'm not going to try. Well, if Bill tells me, Mary Alice, you can learn Japanese, and I say, no, Bill, I don't think I can. I'm struggling with English. Then I have to know whether or not I have the ability, and so do students, and so do athletes. I got to quit, Bill, so you can do some stuff here. The flow of being motivated is being so totally immersed in what you do that you lose a sense of time and you're neither bored nor anxious. You just do it. Like right now, I'm kind of into this. I'm immersed in this activity. I don't know what time it is, and I'm not bored and I'm not anxious. But if I were bored, I wouldn't be able to wait to get this over. And if I was anxious, I wouldn't want to do it. But that's how I was when I was in the gym as a girl, little girl, shooting free throws, paying somebody a quarter to throw me back 100 balls so I could just shoot 100 free throws, 100 free throws. I was never bored. I was never anxious. I was totally immersed in what I was doing. That's what I think a passionate instructor is in a classroom. Ben Franklin tells us this: tell me and I forget, teach me and I remember, but involve me and I learn. And Ben was smart. He knew, I tell you, you're going to forget it. I try to teach you, maybe you'll remember, but if I involve you in the learning, boy, is that coaching. That is coaching and that is teaching. And then we have these 5 levels of Maxwell's leadership that People follow you because they have to. Those are the coaches that don't have a philosophy and teachers that don't. Then people follow you because they kind of want to, they like you and they kind of like what you're doing. And then there are those who follow you because for what you've done for them and for the organization. And then there are others who follow you because of what you have done for them. But the best one, people follow you because of who you are and what you represent. That's the passion in your life. That is your teaching. That is your philosophy. That is your ability to communicate. And that is your love for what you're doing. Okay, Bill, you're on.
Well, I got to tell you, my part's easy, but I wanted to tell you that it is an absolute honor and a pleasure to work with you at Ashford University and Forbes School of Business. And the thing that I really like the most about you is your strong sense of passion and purpose. I think what you communicated here demonstrates that your commitment and dedication to student success and student learning. And of course, you know, when you're on the basketball court, it was the players, but yet their personal lives, their professional lives, you were there for them. So, you know, you really exhibit what a coach is. And, you know, I admire that. And that's why when we talked about this and you agreed to do this presentation, I was anxious to jump in and be a part of it in some way. But you know, you have really added value. And what I'd like to tell you, the thing that I think you do the most for your students, because I've seen you in action, you model consistency, and you're always looking to add value, and you value students, you value people, you value me, you value the organization. You took that assignment for us with Business 105, and you're doing well there. So, you know, it's easy to see your philosophy. It's easy to see the kind of culture you want to create in the classroom, the learning environment. The thing that I also admire is your strong sense of purpose. You know, I was asked that in my Pepsi career, you know, what's your operating philosophy? And, you know, as I've gone through the decades, I kind of shifted and more to people. It's an absolute honor to impact someone's life in a positive way and influence and help. And that's what we do. That's what we're all committed to, and you are. And all of these principles, in my opinion, all fuse together, and they're demonstrated in your forums. They're demonstrated in feedback. They're demonstrated on one-on-one, you know, situations where someone needs some empathy. They need some encouragement. You mentioned encouragement in here. You know, and the thing that I think is absolutely wonderful is how trust and respect emerges as an outcome. And to me, you build that a step at a time and over time, and your principles, in my opinion, do that. All right. And that's why you're sitting here today. You still are contributing, doing the things you love. But it's easy to see how these concepts, these constructs, can be worked in most facets of what we do as educators. And whether it's during COVID-19 times, whether it's going the extra step, whether it's in communication, you know, where we take it, whether it's in feedback and grading and improving that end. And, you know, and I really love the quote. I wrote this down. You're going to be up on my bulletin board now, but successful coaches teach and successful teachers coach. And I'll tell you, in my soft drink career, you know, I consider myself a good coach in the field. And we used to use a little training acronym, the Pepsi Cola Management Institute stuff. We'd say, you know, tell them what you want them to do, relate to them, allow them some practice time, involve them on the job, and no performance, give feedback, that model. The thing that I like, how you mentioned Ben Franklin, and you mentioned, you know, involve me. So, Mary Alice, you've left us all with a great message today. All I can say is kudos to you.
Well, thank you, Bill. Thank you for helping me and for always being an encouragement to me. I can't tell you how much that's meant to me.